On Sunday night, the Biden Autopen scandal went from bit to legit, or at least escalated. Beyond just a meme honoring our great 46th president Autopen, Trump said in a Truth Social post that Biden's pardons are null and void, no longer in effect, and no longer carrying the force of law. Speaking of not carrying the force of law, a social media post doesn't either. But speaking to reporters aboard Air Force One, Trump said legally it's not up to him. It's up to the courts to decide.
Are those executive orders, those pardons from the former president now null and void?
Well, I think so. It's not my decision. That'll be up to a court.
Now, that doesn't announce any specific action, but it implies that one is coming, because it's not a matter for the courts to decide until someone brings it to the courts to decide. So stand by. If you haven't followed the controversy over the last week or so, the Oversight Project, part of the Heritage Foundation, released an analysis showing that Joe Biden's signatures on his last-minute January 19th pardons for his family members, Anthony Fauci, Mark Milley, members of the January 6th committee, and Gerald Lundergan, they all have an identical signature, presumably done by Autopen and not signed by the president himself. The Autopen issue, as in whether Joe Biden personally physically signed these documents himself or not, is really a proxy for the bigger question. Did Joe Biden know that he was signing these documents or not? Because it's likely the pardons are valid even if signed by a robot, so long as the president himself consented to that robot signature on his behalf. In this case, though, given the state of the president, it's fair to question whether Joe Biden knew what he was supposedly doing. After all, the only pardons we know are legit are the Thanksgiving ones that are on video, but he didn't exactly have an easy time with those. Even then, he still needed help from others.
Based on their commitment to being productive members of society as they head to their new home at the University of Minnesota, going to bring them on up, or do I do it there?
And his nervous jokes to cover all the confusion only added to it.
They had to work hard to show patience and be willing to travel over 1,000 miles. You could say even this harder than getting a ticket to the Renaissance tour or Britney's tour. She's down in, it's kind of warm in Brazil right now. Look.
Britney Spears, Beyonce, Taylor Swift. What the hell's the difference anyway? Gobble on, Jack. You're pardoned. But the pardon legitimacy has to be questioned, not just because of the general mumbling and stumbling. It has to be questioned because we know in at least one other scenario, Biden apparently had no knowledge of his signature on an official presidential legal document, at least according to Speaker Mike Johnson.
Sir, why did you pause LNG exports to Europe? Liquefied natural gas is in great demand by our allies. Why would you do that? And he looks at me stunned with this, and he said, I didn't do that. And I said, Mr. President, yes, you did. It was an executive order 3 weeks ago. He was not lying to me. He genuinely did not know what he had signed. I don't know who put the paper in front of him, but he didn't know.
Okay, but even if the suspicion is valid, how would the courts resolve this matter? You can't really just ask the Supreme Court for their opinion. Hey, could you guys please reply to my tweet? There has to be an existing legal dispute for them to resolve. So if Trump is serious about the courts deciding this issue, he'll have to make a legal dispute for them to resolve. The Justice Department would have to bring criminal charges against at least one of the people pardoned, and they could do that on a legitimate basis. The Biden line for why these people were pardoned is to protect them from vengeful Trump political prosecutions, but the other side is they did very plausibly commit crimes. Anthony Fauci has long been accused of lying to Congress under oath about funding gain-of-function research in Wuhan, the very sort of research that is almost certainly responsible for the COVID origin. So bring a perjury charge. Same with Joe Biden's brother James, who is also accused of making false statements to Congress about Joe Biden's knowledge and role in his family's business dealings, at least according to Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer, with some credible evidence to back it up. Mark Milley is already under investigation by the Pentagon Inspector General, in part for his independent conversations with the Chinese that appeared to undermine then-President Trump's foreign policy. Trump called that move an act of treason. Well, here's the opportunity to bring that charge. And of course, there's also Hunter Biden's existing charges and convictions. Tax evasion, lying on gun paperwork, and more. Those could be relevant, but the signature on the Hunter pardon doesn't look like it was auto-penned, or at least that signature doesn't match the other identical ones, so maybe Joe did legitimately sign it. Remember, the Hunter pardon came weeks before the others, December 1st. The allegedly auto-penned ones were done right before Biden left office, January 19th. But the point is, you bring one or more of these charges, and the charged person goes to court and says, "What is this? I was pardoned." And the DOJ says, "No, you weren't. Your pardon isn't valid because the president didn't actually sign it or didn't have knowledge of it." And now you have your legal dispute that the courts will have to resolve. Presumably, whatever that trial court judge says gets appealed, and then the appeals court circuit considers it, and whatever they say gets appealed to the Supreme Court, because this is a new area of judicial review and one of massive consequence. And most likely, none of these courts, including the Supreme Court, are going to be eager to meddle in clear Article II presidential powers. However, the court has established some pardon power definition before. As a matter of dictum or commentary, and not necessarily legally binding holding, the Supreme Court said in a 1981 decision that pardons have traditionally not been the business of the courts and are rarely, if ever, subjects for judicial review. But rarely, and not never, is a key word choice because it does happen. For example, in 1915, the Supreme Court decided that a presidential pardon is only valid if the pardoned person accepts it. In this case, President Woodrow Wilson pardoned a guy in an attempt to force him to testify in court, because getting a pardon means one is no longer at risk of self-incrimination. So the Fifth Amendment protection against it no longer applies. So the Supreme Court has interpreted some rules beyond just the constitutional text of Article II strictly, and as a historical matter, there have been some cases of presidential pardons getting revoked, or kind of revoked. In 1869, upon taking office, President Grant revoked some last-minute pardons from outgoing President Johnson, but that's because he intervened before the pardons were actually delivered. Because they were never delivered, they were never officially valid. And late in his term, George W. Bush initially pardoned a New York City developer for lying to Housing and Urban Development, but when he did, more information came out about the guy's donations to the Republican Party and their candidates, and so to avoid the appearance of corruption, Bush revoked his own pardon, claiming a lack of proper intent due to insufficient knowledge. And both of these cases that stood as legally valid have pieces that are relevant here. What counts as official and what counts as intent? Because if the suspicions are true, we aren't actually talking about revoking a pardon as in the former president said it, but I, the new president, disagree, so I'm now reversing it with made-up constitutional power that doesn't exist. That's not the argument. The argument is those pardons can't be revoked, actually, because they were never valid in the first place. They never even existed because a competent, aware president never signed off on them. The problem, of course, is that point is nearly impossible to prove. However this case is approached, the court can simply ask Biden if he intended to issue those pardons or not. Maybe they'll stumble him into court and he'll mutter something on the stand like, "Listen here, Jack, I may have taken some time off for that Beyonce concert, but I made it back in time to sign those things."
I give you my word as a Biden. I give you my word as a Biden. I give you my word as a Biden.
And as suspect as that word may be, it will be good enough. Or more realistically, maybe his people will just submit yet another document allegedly signed by him, but probably auto-penned, itself saying that he legitimately issued those pardons, with one of those gas station or grocery store "I did that" stickers repurposed to prove it. The point is, all that has to happen is some form of a Joe Biden statement that says, yes, these pardons were issued by me, or intended by me, or consented to by me, or whatever, and that's probably the end of it. We can't examine his brain to determine whether that's true, and frankly, it'd be very dangerous to try. We'd get lost in the abyss, searching endlessly for rare Britney Spears tickets that don't even exist anymore. Her shows are free on Instagram now. The problem is Biden can just lie and say, yeah, whatever my signature is supposedly on, that's what I meant, which is why we need something more objective and reliable to resolve the matter. We need something with an accountability mechanism. We need a game, actually, not just a rubber stamp with a presumption of truth-telling for a habitual liar. And I found one author with a great idea in that pursuit. Per Aaron Walker on Twitchy, instead of just inviting Biden to say, yes, I did that, with no independent mechanism to determine if that's actually true, we should send investigators to meet with him for a recorded exercise. Investigators bring his real, though disputed, pardons, and mix some fake ones in that look identical and maybe are even for real people with whom he was associated. Put Corn Pop in there and see what happens. He was a bad dude, but he's hereby forgiven. And then ask Joe Biden to identify which pardons are real and which pardons are fake. And please do explain the reasoning behind the real pardons. If Joe Biden can do that, I think we're all convinced. If, however, he has no idea what anybody's talking about, or he starts explaining exactly why he pardoned Corn Pop, well, then Mike Johnson was right. If Biden can't identify and explain his pardons, how did he possibly have intent to issue them? If he didn't have intent to issue them, they are not valid. And not only will it bring justice and clarity, but this game will be a national event. Put it on pay-per-view and erase our national debt. Everyone will be tuning in. The only problem is, again, that elusive Biden consent. Assuming Biden isn't just going to let investigators into his home for this much-anticipated event, there'd have to be some form of force to do it. Now, he's not suspected criminally in this matter, so it wouldn't be a warrant. The court would have to issue some kind of subpoena to compel him to testify, and to do it in this specific and unusual way. Speaking of judicial hesitation to overstep into constitutional presidential powers, at least in this pardon context, probably not happening. As entertaining as the game would be, the court would have to agree to the game, and that is almost certainly a no. But it probably still is worth the pursuit, at least the legal game generally, not the did you or did you not pardon Corn Pop game. Worst case is just status quo. Biden supposedly issued these suspect pardons on his way out, but nobody really knows if he actually did or not, so I guess they stand. Okay, nothing changes. Best case, though, maybe we do actually get some new rules about what counts as a presidential signature. Maybe we do get some more information about when and how these pardons were signed. Maybe we do get some new facts and evidence about the activities of those who were pardoned. The upside prospect is low, sure, but there is no downside other than probably wasted time. But this is the federal government, after all. What else do they exist to do? Wasted time is preferable, actually, to doors kicked and dogs shot, another routine Fed business, plus the bill for services rendered. Thanks as always for listening and for supporting this channel. Always appreciate that thoughtful discussion down below, and especially over on X, that is at ML Christiansen. You're always welcome to coming out and chatting my live streams. Those live on Wednesday and Sunday nights. Looking forward to it. Goodbye. Hey, if you made it all the way to the end of the video, that means you probably found some value in the video. If you found some value in the video, please consider supporting my material. You can do that one time or recurring for as little as $1 a month. It not only helps me sustain, but it helps me pay the people who make my videos possible. Linked in the description for you, mattchristiansenmedia.com/support. Thanks for listening.